Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. One thing Vrodar never realized the moment he woke up was how quickly his decision would lead to the first war the Galactic Council had declared in 3 centuries. Perhaps if he had noticed the unusual weapons testings on Earth's surface, or paid closer attention to the military frequencies hidden among civilian transmissions, he might have exercised more caution. But diplomacy had never been his strong suit, which was precisely why they sent him. The hypersleep pod's translucent cover slid away with a hiss of pressure equalizing, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor that dissipated into the ship's recycled atmosphere. Vrodar's consciousness returned in stages, first sensation, then awareness, finally memory. His limbs tingled with the familiar discomfort of cellular reactivation. 120 years of suspended animation left its mark, even on a physiology as advanced as his. He blinked his large, oval eyes, adjusting to the dim blue emergency lighting that bathed the chamber. The soft green skin of his slender fingers felt clammy against the pod's metal edge as he hoisted himself upright. His antennae lowered involuntarily, sampling the air and detecting the subtle scent of old atmosphere, filled with traces of gases that would take a while to be filtered. The journey had been grueling, even by council standards. Gathering representatives from their respective worlds and then traveling to this backwater solar system had consumed valuable resources. Even the FTL capabilities, the sheer vastness of the galaxy, imposed limitations that no amount of technology could fully overcome. Vrodar's first priority was checking on the other counselors. He approached Reptar's pod, noting with satisfaction that he had awakened faster than his colleagues, a small victory, but one he savored nonetheless. The pod's diagnostic display indicated that Reptar was already in the final stages of revival. The cover of Reptar's pod reacted, revealing the reptilian counselor's impressive form. Green scales caught the light as his chest rose and fell with increasingly deep breaths. His muscular, bipedal frame shifted slightly as consciousness returned. 5-fingered hands flexed instinctively, and his eyes, with their vertical pupils, opened with alarming sadness.
"Vrodar,"
Reptar's voice was raspy from disuse.
"We have arrived."
"Indeed,"
Vrodar confirmed, unable to keep a hint of pride from his voice.
"I was the first to awaken."
Reptar's scaled brow ridge rose slightly.
"A peculiar achievement to boast about, but I congratulate you nonetheless."
Vrodar moved on to check Sorgor's pod. Unlike Reptar's, this one showed no external signs of movement or recovery, yet the diagnostics indicated full consciousness. Puzzled, Vrodar peered through the transparent section of the pod's cover. Yellow eyes stared back at him, wide open and unblinking. No other part of Sorgor's body moved, not a twitch, not a breath that Vrodar could discern. The stillness was unnerving. Without warning, the pod cover slid open. Sorgor remained motionless for 10 more seconds before abruptly sitting upright in a single, fluid motion that made Vrodar step back reflexively. Sorgor's appearance always unsettled Vrodar, though he would never admit it. The Crodsrian's red skin seemed to absorb rather than reflect the chamber's lighting, 2 curved horns protruding from his forehead, sweeping backward over a mane of dark hair that hung in sharp contrast to his crimson complexion. When Sorgor opened his mouth to speak, rows of needle-sharp teeth became visible, and his long, forked tongue flicked out momentarily. "Your discomfort amuses me, Vrodar," Sorgor said, his voice unexpectedly melodious for a being of his intimidating appearance. "After all our missions together, one would think you'd have adjusted."
"I was merely concerned for your well-being,"
Vrodar lied, turning away.
"Your revival patterns are unconventional."
"As is my species," Sogor replied, rising from his pod with unnatural grace for someone who had been suspended for over a century. Unsettled by the Crodsrian's piercing gaze, Vrodar moved to a reflective panel near the chamber's communication console, ostensibly to check the ship's status, but really seeking the comfort of his own, more conventional appearance. The reflection that greeted him was reassuringly familiar. His soft green skin had maintained its elasticity during the long journey. His two sensory antennae atop his hairless head moved around with heightened awareness. His large eyes, evolved for the dim light of his homeworld, blinked back at him, their round pupils adjusting to the chamber's illumination. The small holes that served for smell and hearing on either side of his oval face opened and closed gently, processing the ship's artificial atmosphere.
"Vanity, Vrodar?"
came Reptar's amused voice from behind him.
"Or are you ensuring you're presentable for our first contact with the humans?"
Neither,
Vrodar replied, turning from his reflection.
I'm assessing my physical condition after revival, a practice you might benefit from, considering your scales appear to have lost some luster during hypersleep.
Reptar's hand moved instinctively to his neck scales, before he caught himself and converted the motion into a dismissive wave.
"The others are awakening. Perhaps we should prepare the briefing room."
Indeed, throughout the chamber, the remaining pods were activating their revival sequences. The council representatives, 7 in total, would soon be fully conscious and expecting a comprehensive update on their mission. 2 hours later, all 7 council representatives have gathered in the ship's central briefing chamber. A holographic projection of Earth rotated slowly above the circular table around which they sat, its blue-green surface occasionally obscured by swirling white cloud formations.
It's been 120 years since we detected their first primitive radio transmissions,
Vrodar began, initiating the formal proceedings.
As protocol dictates, we have briefly monitored their development from a distance, awaiting signs of unified governance and technological advancement sufficient for council consideration.
"This isn't our first acquisition mission,"
Reptar interjected, his clawed finger tapping impatiently against the table's polished surface.
"Let's dispense with the formalities and assess their current status."
Sogor's yellow eyes narrowed slightly. "Procedure exists for a reason, Councillor Reptar, but I agree. This team don't need formalities. Let us focus on what has changed during our journey." Vrodar gestured to the hologram, which zoomed in to display a global network of light points, interconnected by countless threads of data transmission.
Their information technology has progressed at an unprecedented rate. The quantity of data being exchanged between their devices exceeds that of many established council civilizations. Impressive,
admitted Zellar, the furry representative whose black fur refracted the hologram's color.
But information exchange alone does not indicate societal advancement. True,
Vrodar agreed,
which is why their space exploration achievements are disappointing.
The hologram shifted, highlighting Earth's moon and the planet Mars.
2 meager colonies, if they can even be called that, research outposts at best, lacking self-sufficiency and housing fewer than 500 humans combined.
"Primitive, no other word for that,"
Reptar declared dismissively.
What's truly concerning,
Vrodar continued,
is their persistent division.
The hologram shifted again, displaying a geopolitical map of Earth with its nations.
194 distinct political entities, each with their own governance, military, and other competing interests. Despite their global communication network, they've failed to achieve unification and communication. Unthinkable,
Zellar said.
How can they manage interplanetary affairs without a unified governing body? The administrative nightmare alone would be crippling. They don't manage it well,
Vrodar confirmed.
Their lunar and Martian outposts are operated by consortiums of nations and private entities, resulting in competing protocols, redundant systems, and a general lack of strategic direction.
The holographic display shifted to show snippets of Earth's digital communications, news broadcasts, social media exchanges, and government bulletins, all automatically translated for the Council's benefit.
Their information networks are most encrypted, but what isn't reveal further fragmentation.
Vrodar continued.
Not only are they divided politically, but culturally and ideologically as well. They have thousands of languages, religions, and cultural identities, with little sign of convergence. I'm surprised they invented the wheel, and even more so they managed to retain that knowledge.
A species this fractured would be disastrous if allowed to expand into the greater galaxy,
Reptar stated flatly.
Imagine dozens, perhaps hundreds, of independent human colonies, each with their own agenda, spreading throughout neighboring systems.
Sogor's long fingers tapped constantly against the table. The precedent would undermine the very foundation of the Council. Our mandate is to ensure orderly expansion and integration of emerging species. Humans appear fundamentally opposed to such unity. "Let's not be hasty," Cora cautioned, her words translated from the burbling sounds her aquatic physiology produced. "Many species show resistance to unification initially, perhaps with guidance."
We have monitored them for over a century, Vrodar interrupted. Their trajectory is clear. If anything, some of their political unions have fragmented further during our journey here. Their attempts at global governance remain ceremonial at best, with real power firmly in the hands of their larger nation-states and corporate entities.
The councillors fell silent, absorbing this assessment.
There is another anomaly worth noting,
Vrodar added, altering the display once more. The hologram now showed chronological data covering the last century of human development.
Their technological advancement is highly uneven and follows an unusual pattern.
The visualization highlighted multiple technology tracks: aerospace, information systems, energy production, medicine, weaponry, each represented by a different colored line tracking upward over time.
Observe how their information technology,
Vrodar pointed to a steeply rising blue line,
has accelerated far beyond typical developmental models. They've created virtual spaces, artificial intelligences, and data processing capabilities that rival some mid-tier council civilizations. Yet their energy production,
he indicated a much more gradually rising green line,
remains primitive. They still rely predominantly on burning things to a spinner generator with water vapor, with only limited adoption of fission and no evidence of fusion energy or star harvesting technologies. Most concerning,
Vrodar continued,
is the pattern here.
He highlighted the aerospace and weapons development line, which showed an unusual correlation.
Their space technology advances primarily when driven by military competition, then stagnates during periods of relative peace. This suggests their eventual expansion to the stars may be motivated by conflict rather than cooperation. A warlike species with advanced information processing capabilities?
Mokhtari summarized, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic light.
History tells us this combination rarely ends well.
Precisely,
Vrodar agreed.
And there's more. We've analyzed their cultural output, entertainment, literature, historical records. Humans are obsessed with conflict narratives. Their most popular fiction frequently depicts them triumphant against more advanced alien civilizations.
Delusional,
scoffed Reptar.
Perhaps,
Vrodar conceded.
But revealing of their psychology. They expect to encounter other intelligent life, and they're preparing, psychologically at least, for those encounters to be hostile.
Sogor rose from his seat, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the holographic Earth. I believe we've seen enough to make our determination. We face 3 options: attempt integration, quarantine, or preemptive action.
Integration seems impractical given their fractured nature,
Zelar observed.
They would require extensive restructuring of their societies.
Quarantine is risky,
added Reptar.
Their information technology is advancing rapidly. It's only a matter of time before they achieve breakthroughs in propulsion. Once they begin establishing independent colonies, containment becomes exponentially more difficult.
Which leaves us with preemptive action, Sogor concluded. A regrettable necessity, but one that serves the greater galactic stability. Vrodar surveyed his fellow councillors.
Before we proceed to a formal vote, I propose we review our simulation models.
With a gesture, he transformed the holographic display into a complex web of potential futures, branching out from the present moment. Each branch represented a different outcome based on various intervention scenarios.
Our predictive algorithms have analyzed over 1 million potential futures for humanity,
Vrodar explained.
In 62% of scenarios, where humans are left to develop without intervention, they fragment into competing interstellar factions within the next 3 centuries.
The display highlighted these branches in red, showing simulated conflict zones spreading throughout the local galactic sector.
In 15.7% of scenarios, they achieve a tenuous unification, but only after devastating wars that leave their planet severely compromised.
These branches appeared in yellow, demonstrating a more contained but still problematic outcome.
In only 6% of scenarios do they achieve peaceful unification and controlled expansion.
These few branches glowed green, representing the Council's preferred outcome. "And our intervention's options?" Cora asked. Vrodar adjusted the display.
Diplomatic introduction and guided integration shows a 22% success probability, given their current division and psychological resistance to outside authority.
Unacceptably low,
Reptar muttered.
Quarantine and containment offers a 54% success rate for the first century, but drops to 17% by the 3rd century as their technology inevitably advances.
Which leaves the final option, Sogor stated more than asked. Vrodar nodded solemnly.
Preemptive military action, followed by controlled reorganization of their governance structures, offers an 89% probability of successful integration within the Council framework.
The numbers speak for themselves,
Reptar declared.
I vote for immediate implementation of War Protocol.
One by one, the councillors registered their positions. Despite Cora's initial hesitation, the final vote was unanimous. Earth would face the Council's military might. Vrodar stared at the holographic display of Earth for several moments after the others had departed. The declaration had been sent. Now, it was time to prepare for the inevitable response. Submission, as it had been with unworthy species faced with the Council's overwhelming might. He felt, rather than heard, the approach of Reptar and Sogor. The 3 of them shared something the other councillors did not, the instincts of predators, of warriors. "The others have retired to their quarters," Sogor observed, his yellow eyes reflecting the blue glow of the holographic Earth. "As they always do when action is required."
They lack the constitution for what comes next,
Reptar added, lips pressed together with anticipation. Vrodar nodded, understanding the unspoken truth that bound the 3 of them. Of the 7 council races, only theirs had evolved as apex predators, species whose path to sentience had been forged through conflict rather than cooperation, with the difference that they were rather unified under a leader unlike humanity. The Thulari, Vrodar's people, had emerged from the rather high levels of competition in their swamp-covered homeworld, where hunting parties had eventually given way to modern armies. And then there was Sogor. The Croadsrians remained the most martial of all council species, their blood-red skin a constant reminder of their particularly violent evolutionary path. They had been the last admitted to the council, and some still questioned the wisdom of their inclusion.
The others will theorize, debate, and document,
Vrodar said.
We 3 will act.
As it should be,
Reptar replied, stretching his powerful limbs in a display of power. The 3 war-born councillors moved in unison towards the main viewing port, a vast transparent section of the command ship's hull that currently showed only the empty void of space, Earth, a distant blue sphere. The rest of their fleet remained cloaked in light-bending fields, invisible to both primitive human detection systems and the naked eye. "It begins," Sogor said, pointing to a subtle distortion in the darkness, the first hint that their massive armada was awakening from its slumber. Vrodar felt a familiar tension in his chest, the ancestral thrill of impending conflict that millennia of civilization had tampered but never eliminated.
The vanguard emerges.
They watched in appreciative silence as sleek, predatory vessels materialized against the starfield. First came the scout ships, then the medium destroyers with their distinctive blade-like profiles, their hulls gleaming with weapons ports, still closed but primed. Behind them, the massive dreadnoughts began to phase into normal space, each capable of sterilizing an entire continent.
"Magnificent,"
Reptar whispered, his scaled hands clasped behind his back.
"The humans will surrender at the mere sight of such power."
"They will beg for mercy," Sogor agreed, his sharp teeth visible in what passed for a smile among his kind. Vrodar contemplated the growing armada.
We should preserve a significant population for study and cultural rehabilitation. Their information technology shows promise.
"Agreed,"
said Reptar.
"A selective culling rather than extinction."
Sogor's yellow eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "We can implement the cultural improvement protocol, give the survivors a clean path to eventual council membership, under probationary terms, of course. In a few centuries, they might even become useful, a species under a single banner, as it should be."
If they can overcome their fractious nature, they will be welcomed,
Vrodar added. The view before them continued to fill with warships as more of the fleet decloaked. The councillors moved closer to the viewport, their reflections superimposed against the emerging armada like ghostly overseers.
The invasion force is nearly ready,
Vrodar noted, activating a communication panel embedded in the viewport's frame.
Fleet Command, this is Council Overseer Vrodar. Prepare for full deployment and attack vector calculation.
"Acknowledged, Overseer," came the immediate response. "Fleet at 86% deployment. Attack coordination underway." Reptar made a dismissive gesture.
"This is hardly a subtle approach. The entire planet will witness our arrival."
"Subtlety is unnecessary," Sogor countered. "Our scans confirm they possess no significant space-based defenses or combat vessels. A few distant, barely occupied bases, few primitive satellites, and that pathetic excuse for a space station. They cannot fight what they cannot reach." Vrodar nodded in agreement.
Their most advanced spacecraft are limited to near-Earth orbit. There is no reason to take them seriously.
The final vessels emerged from hiding, completing the imposing display of Council military might. Nearly 1,000 ships of various classes now floating in the void between Earth and its moon. their formation spreading across thousands of kilometers of space, enough firepower to reduce the planet to molten slag if they wished. "Fleet deployment complete," announced the command system. "Awaiting final attack authorization." The three Marshal Councillors exchanged glances, a moment of understanding passing between them. Though the vote had been unanimous, they alone would bear responsibility for what was to come.
"For the stability of the galaxy,"
Vrodar said formally.
"For the Council's mandate,"
added Reptar. "For the future of all civilized species," finished Sogor. Vrodar pressed his palm against the authorization panel.
"Fleet Command, you are authorized to proceed with primary attack plan. Move into position around the target planet and await final strike command."
"Executing, Overseer," came the response. The vast armada began to move with surprising grace for such massive constructs, forming into various attack clusters as they advanced towards Earth. Vrodar studied the tactical display. Everything was proceeding according to established protocols, yet something nagged at the edges of his awareness, a subtle anomaly in the data stream.
"There's been a significant increase in electromagnetic communications across the planet,"
he noted, pointing to the rapidly shifting patterns on the tactical overlay. Reptar moved closer to examine the readings.
"Perhaps they've detected our presence, despite their lack of infrastructure in space."
"It's not impossible they had some telescopes pointed at us by chance," Sogor said.
"Nevertheless,"
Vrodar countered,
"something has changed. We should assume a global alert status."
"It changes nothing,"
Reptar dismissed.
"Whether they see us coming or not, the outcome remains inevitable."
Vrodar wasn't so certain, but he kept his concerns to himself as they watched the fleet continue its approach towards Earth. The lead vessels were now passing the lunar orbit, their weapon systems powering up for the first strike. "We should finalize our attack methodology," Sogor suggested. "The strike plan offers several options for initial engagement." Vrodar brought up the relevant tactical data.
"The atmospheric dispersion of neutron-active compounds would be most effective. Minimal structural damage to infrastructure, rapid incapacitation of biological targets."
"Too slow,"
Reptar argued.
"Precision kinetic strikes against their primary military and governmental installations would achieve immediate command disruption. Follow with the chemical approach to manage surviving population centers."
"Both approaches seek to minimize unnecessary suffering," Sogor observed, "though I question whether such mercy is warranted for a species that would inevitably bring chaos to the galactic community."
"Protocol dictates minimizing suffering when practical,"
Vrodar reminded him.
"Our goal is not to punish them for infractions they have yet to commit, but to prevent those infractions from occurring."
Their debate was interrupted by a sudden, blinding flash from the tactical display. Vrodar blinked rapidly, his specialized membranes struggling to adjust to the unexpected brightness.
"What was that?"
Reptar demanded. Before anyone could respond, the ship's AI announced in its neutral tone, "Alert! Vanguard Destroyer Helix 7 has been eliminated." Sogor hissed. "System malfunction. Recalibrate sensors." "Fleet Command confirmed readings," the AI responded. "Vanguard Destroyer Helix 7 has been completely destroyed. No debris larger enough to be detected." Vrodar stared at the display in disbelief.
"Cause of destruction?"
"High energy release, analysis suggests." Another flash cut off the AI's response, followed immediately by a third and fourth.
"Multiple vessels under attack,"
Reptar shouted unnecessarily.
"Battle stations."
The fleet erupted into chaos as warning signals blared and emergency protocols activated automatically. The tactical display now showed 4 gaps in their formation where powerful warships had been moments before. What weapon could do this? Sogor demanded, his usual composure cracking. "They have nothing capable of—" 5 more flashes interrupted him, each representing the instantaneous destruction of a Council warship. Vrodar's mind raced, analyzing the impossible data before him.
The attacks are originating from the planet's surface,
He realized aloud.
they're launching something at us.
The tactical system finally isolated the threat, highlighting hundreds, no, thousands of small objects rapidly ascending from Earth's surface.
Primitive ballistic missiles.
Reptar identified them, his voice a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect.
They're using ground-based launch systems.
Impossible, Sogor insisted again. Why would they have so many missiles without ever having taken part in a spatial war? Another series of flashes proved him wrong as more Council ships vanished from existence. Sensor analysis complete, the AI announced with its maddening calm. Earth weapons utilizing fission, fusion, and antimatter warheads, yield exceeding estimated parameters by a factor of 50.
Fusion? Antimatter?
Vrodar couldn't hide his shock.
They've weaponized antimatter without developing proper spaceship cores. They don't even use fusion for energy. Why would they have bombs?
The tactical display was now a chaotic mess of warning indicators as the human counterattack continued unabated. Council vessels attempted evasion maneuvers, but the sheer volume of incoming missiles made complete avoidance impossible. 78 vessels destroyed, reported the AI. 22% of fleet was compromised. No shilling can stop those weapons.
This is madness,
Reptar snarled, slamming his scaled fist against the viewport frame.
Why do they have that? It makes no sense.
Vrodar watched in horrified fascination as their carefully assembled armada disintegrated under the human onslaught.
The energy output we're witnessing is enough to destroy their own planet 10 times over. Why would they develop such destructive capacity?
Because they're insane, Sogor growled. Our cultural analysis was correct. They're fundamentally unstable and dangerous. Another series of massive explosions ripped through the fleet's central command section. The flagship itself shuddered as debris from destroyed nearby vessels impacted its shields. Fleet integrity critical, the AI updated.
Recall the remaining ships,
Vrodar ordered.
Too late,
Reptar observed grimly, pointing to the tactical display.
The missiles have saturated every sector. There's nowhere to maneuver.
Vrodar stared at the data in growing comprehension.
Their communications technology, it wasn't just an anomaly in their development. It was the key to coordinating this level of response. They've synchronized a global counterstrike using thousands of independent launch systems.
And their weapons, Sogor added, his voice hollow with realization. No spaceships, but they can reach space?
In isolation, they're equivalent to mid-tier Council civilization weapon yields,
Vrodar finished.
We misunderstood their entire technological development path.
The ship rocked violently as something massive detonated nearby. Warning lights bathed the command deck in crimson. 89% of the fleet was destroyed, the AI reported. The 3 warborn counselors stood in stunned silence as their warfleet was erased by a supposedly primitive species they had come to subjugate. A new alert sounded, different from the battle warnings. Incoming transmission, the AI announced. Origin, Earth surface, laser beam-based communication. Vrodar exchanged glances with his fellow counselors.
Accept transmission.
Accept transmission, Vrodar ordered, preparing himself for the demands that would surely follow. Human demands. The very thought was inconceivable mere hours ago. The tactical display remained empty for several moments, causing Reptar to shift impatiently.
Technical malfunction?
No, Sogor replied. The signal is being received. The translation protocols are processing.
How could they even communicate with us?
Vrodar wondered aloud.
They couldn't possibly know our language structures. They can't.
Vrodar answered his own question.
But our systems can handle both layers of translation if necessary. We're designed for first contact scenarios after all.
First contact?
Reptar repeated with bitter irony.
This hardly qualifies anymore.
Before further discussion could occur, the display suddenly illuminated, not with a single human face as Vrodar had expected, but with several arranged in a grid pattern. Each image showed a different human, and beneath each, a colorful rectangular symbol that the AI automatically labeled as national identifiers. Multiple communicators, Sogo observed, unable to hide his surprise. Their factions are speaking to us together? The human beneath a red, white, and blue striped flag with stars spoke first. The AI translated smoothly. This is an emergency joint communication from Earth's major powers. We wish to understand if we have severely misinterpreted your intentions or acted accordingly. Vrodar blinked in confusion. Where was the triumphant declaration? The demands for surrender? This sounded almost apologetic. Another human beneath a red flag with yellow stars leaned forward. If your initial approach was intended as a peaceful first contact, we deeply regret the misunderstanding that has occurred.
Misunderstanding? Reptar hissed. We explicitly declared war.
A third human under a tricolored flag of white, blue, and red spoke. We believe we are responding to an imminent existential threat to our planet. If this was not your intention, we urgently request clarification. The council representatives exchanged bewildered glances. This was not at all what they had expected. They think this was a failed peaceful contact attempt? Sogor observed, his voice tinged with disbelief. Vrodar stepped forward, composing himself, but not lying. That would just make things worse now that they didn't have a fleet to enforce anything.
This is Overseer Vrodar of the Galactic Council. Your response was appropriate to our declaration. There is no misunderstanding about our intentions. We deemed your species unsuitable for council membership due to your planetary fragmentation.
The human's expression registered near simultaneous shock, a surprising unified reaction for supposedly divided factions. The human under the flag with a sun emblem and vertical stripes leaned forward. Are we understanding correctly? You attacked Earth because humanity is not politically unified under a single government?
Yes,
Vrodar confirmed, feeling suddenly defensive.
Fragmented species can only bring chaos to the galactic community when they achieve interstellar capabilities. Our simulations predicted your eventual expansion would result in endless competing human factions establishing independent colonies, destabilizing established territories.
The humans exchanged rapid glances with each other, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and something else. Was it amusement? It seems there has been a profound miscommunication, said the human under the green, yellow, and blue flag. While Earth does have nearly 200 sovereign nations, we have extensive international cooperation frameworks. The response you witnessed was coordinated through our global defense protocols. That's obvious now, Sogo interjected. Our analysis of your communications clearly showed competition and conflict between your factions. Of course we compete, replied the human under the white, red, and green tricolor flag. We also cooperate when necessary, like now. Vrodar felt a growing unease. Something fundamental had been misunderstood about human societal structure.
We need to discuss this privately, he announced abruptly. Please stand by.
The transmission was muted, though not terminated. The council representatives huddled together.
This makes no sense,
Reptar insisted.
Their entire history is defined by interfactional warfare.
Yet they coordinated a unified planetary defense flawlessly,
Vrodar observed.
That requires unprecedented cooperation for a species with their political structure.
Vrodar's mind raced through the implications.
Perhaps our assessment was flawed. Their fragmentation may be more superficial than we realized. Or perhaps they function differently than other species.
Vrodar continued, thinking aloud.
They may have developed methods of coexisting despite political boundaries that we failed to account for.
Sogor remained skeptical. Even if they can coordinate in crisis, that doesn't resolve the fundamental risk they pose to galactic stability if they expand as separate entities.
Does it matter anymore?
Vrodar asked bluntly.
They've destroyed our fleet. We cannot enforce any demand, and we're unlikely to receive reinforcements for decades at minimum.
The reality of their situation settled heavily upon the three war councillors. Whatever theoretical threat humans might pose in the future, the immediate question was how to proceed from their current position of weakness, where retreat or diplomacy was all they could do.
Reopen communications,
Vrodar instructed. The humans reappeared on screen, apparently having had their own conference in the interim.
We wish to understand better,
Vrodar began cautiously.
If you are not unified, how did you coordinate such an effective defense? And why do you possess weapon systems of such devastating capability? You've never fought a space war.
The humans again exchanged glances, seeming to decide who would respond. Finally, the one beneath the red, white, and blue flag spoke. We developed these weapons originally for use against each other, the human admitted. For nearly a century, we've maintained what we call a balance of terror, each nation possessing enough destructive capability to deter attacks from the other.
You build planet-killing weapons to not use them?
Reptar asked incredulously. Precisely, nodded the human under the red and white flag with a leaf symbol. Mutually assured destruction. It keeps global peace despite our differences. As for why we could engage targets in orbit, added another, many of these weapons were designed to intercept each other in flight or target satellites. Adapting them to target your vessels was relatively straightforward. Our global communication networks allowed us to coordinate the response. Vrodar struggled to process this information.
So you've been sitting on an enormous pile of weapons for 100 years, but never pressed the button?
That's an accurate assessment, confirmed the human under the blue, white, and red tricolor. Until today, we were used to a small fraction of them. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans had developed a strange form of stability through potential annihilation. Now had deployed a small fraction of them.
We need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about your species,
Vrodar finally admitted.
It appears that your fragmentation functions differently than what we thought.
And what happens now?
Asked the human under the flag with a central circle.
War with your kind or kinds?
Vrodar exchanged glances with Reptar and Sogor before responding, not revealing that they would be utterly helpless for the decades to come.
No, we would rather avoid that.
Then perhaps we can start over,
suggested the human under the rising sun flag. Vrodar felt the weight of a momentous decision pressing upon him. The humans had lost nothing in this military exchange. They were even stranger than they had initially believed, capable of maintaining fragmentation yet unity, developing apocalyptic weapons as a path to peace. Perhaps there was something in this paradoxical approach that might be worth studying rather than extinguishing.
We would be amenable to discussions,
Vrodar said carefully,
though the full council will need to develop an entirely new framework for interaction with your unique societal structure.
The meeting concluded with tentative arrangements for further communication and a suggestion to relocate their ships further away from Earth. As the transmission ended, Vrodar turned to his fellow war councillors.
It seems humans didn't beg for mercy at all, he reflected. They asked for war, and then, surprisingly, for peace.
Do you think they can maintain this balance indefinitely? Sogor asked, still skeptical.
I don't know,
Vrodar admitted.
But it appears we have a century or more to figure that out, and perhaps our own assumptions about unity and fragmentation deserves re-examination.
As the command deck fell silent, Vrodar gazed at the holographic image of Earth, still rotating serenely despite the devastation that had occurred in orbit around it. Humans had proven themselves to be not just formidable, but incomprehensible by Council standards. And in that incomprehensibility